Hey everybody, welcome back to the Stellium Astrology podcast. I'm Stephanie James, your host. I'm the founder of StelliumAstrology.com. I am a tutor at the London School of Astrology, and I also have written horoscopes for a number of publications, including Elle magazine. I've got that tickle in my throat, which can only mean one thing. I've had my lunch, and today I had a lovely, huge salad, absolutely enormous salad. I love to put beetroot on it, and I just have mayonnaise as the dressing. I just have mayonnaise, and I like to mix the beetroot and the mayonnaise so it's pink. So I have like a pink salad. I don't know why. I just love it. Just love to do it. Okay, so today we're moving on to another aspect pattern, and we're moving on to the Grand Trine. So I'm so sorry that I've got this tickle in my throat. It is very annoying. It's annoying to have, and it's annoying to have to listen to, so I do apologise in advance. My aim for these shows is to not be like super duper laborious and explainy about these things. I don't want to go into too much detail. I just want to give you some ideas and inspire you to go and research some of these things for yourself. A lot of the information that you might need as an astrologer, as a budding astrologer, can be found on astro.com. And astro.com, they've got Astro Wiki, which is where you've got like a kind of astrology Wikipedia, which isn't written by people from Wikipedia. It's written by real astrologers. Wikipedia does have astrology sections, which are quite good, and I know an astrologer who does correct Wikipedia as well. So it can be trusted, but I would say Astro Wiki is a very reliable source for good information. Anything to do with the aspects, so there are plenty of books out there that will be linked at the bottom of this episode blog post. Planets in Aspect by Robert Patelia. Sorry, I always do that. It's not Patelia, it's Pelletier. I don't know. I think I'm slightly dyslexic. I don't know if I am. I just think my mind makes stuff up sometimes and convinces me that's what I've seen. The Contemporary Astrologer's Handbook is a great one, and Aspects in Astrology as well, written by Sue Tompkins. Both of those books are. But there are plenty. I shall at some point form a reading list for you guys so you can have a little look and see what you think. Pick out some books. I'm trying to be organised. I do my best. There's a lot. I'm juggling a lot at the moment. So anyway, let's get on to the Grand Trine. So the Grand Trine is, as you've probably imagined or guessed, is connected to the trine in astrology. The trine being two planets that sit 120 degrees apart. And the thing that the planets have in common when they're in trine to each other is that they're related by their element. Usually, if it's slightly wide, then they can be out of element, and that can happen. But if they're all in the same element, then it really is like the it superpowers them really. So the Grand Trine is when you've got three planets which are all in the same element but in different signs at about the same degree. So say you had, for example, three planets at 15 degrees of each of the water signs, then you'd have a Grand Water Trine. But you can have Grand Earth Trine, Grand Air Trine, Grand Fire Trine. And you can have any planets involved in the trine really. Don't really include your ascendant. So if you had, say you had like Venus and Mars trine each other in Scorpio and Pisces, then if you had, if they both trined your ascendant, yes, they trine your ascendant. I wouldn't say that necessarily makes a grand trine. They just both feed into your ascendant in a nice way. If you had a planet on your ascendant, like say you had Moon in Cancer, rising at 15, that fed into the others, then that's a grand trine, and that does actually sort of superpower you, gives you some kind of amazing superpowers. So the Grand Trine, it's a kind of a powered up trine aspect where it almost reinforces the structure of the elements that it connects basically. So it's a really, as we've explored in the previous show, which is what are the aspects and how are they assigned their nature. If you haven't heard it, I think that's episode 52. With that episode, we went into how each of the aspects are assigned their nature, and the trine is very much associated with Jupiter. So for the trine to be associated with Jupiter, it takes on Jupiterian qualities, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be all Jupiter. It's all about Jupiter, but it is considered to be lucky. There does seem to be a kind of natural abundance about a trine, and there's a kind of good fortune, just all the more positive things that you can imagine if you were to hand pick, because Jupiter is known as the greater benefic, and benefic, obviously that word being associated with being beneficial. So it's quite a nice aspect to have. The sextile being related to Venus, the lesser benefic, again another beneficial aspect. But yeah, we're talking about the trine. So if you've got three planets at 120 degrees apart, and they're all speaking to each other, it could be that they're slightly wide and out of sign. With a trine, generally it's about 4 to 6. Is it 4 to 6 degrees? I think with the trine it's 6 degrees of orb. But if you're like me, I usually go up to 8 degrees, but it depends, like I said, it's not an exact science, astrology, that's why it can't be a science, though there's plenty of people out there that might argue with me on that matter. It's more of a craft, it's more of an art, I would say. It's about interpretation, rather than being rigid. I don't know, there are astrologers out there that are very rigid about it, and they're not wrong either. They've got their own way and they've got their client base, and they reach out and connect with the people that they resonate with. But yeah, so I don't know, I just have always kind of lumped the trine aspect at about 8 degrees really. And everybody, if you're listening to this, you'll figure out what feels right for you. So there is the problem with a trine. So we have got, there are nice aspects to the trine and there are more challenging aspects. What's challenging about a trine, I think, is probably the easiest thing to explore, is that, or a grand trine, is that it can lead to a sense of lethargy almost, where, there's no real get up and go. So there's kind of like a distinct sort of a lack of tension, which you can overlook the good fortune that a trine can bring. You can kind of operate on a subconscious level without really tapping into the gifts that the grand trine can bestow. However, I know a few people with grand trines. I think I've talked about them previously when I was probably talking about the trine episode, who are aware of their trine, and because they're aware, and this is what's great about astrology, if you learn about your chart, if you've learned about if you've identified that you might have this aspect pattern in your natal chart, then you can take advantage of it. It's something that you can consciously work with, whereas it's just such an easy flowing harmonious aspect that if you weren't consciously aware of it, you could easily overlook it. So there is a conscious effort that is required to take advantage. Annoyingly, I had been planning people's some charts to look at. I'm just having a look to see if I've picked out. All right, so there is one celebrity who kind of contains a few interesting aspect patterns that I looked at. Oh, here we go. I've got my celebrity, my trine celebrity, my grand trine celebrity is Jami Lee Curtis. And I was looking at her Astro Data Bank profile, and actually on here it says in categories at the bottom it tells you, and her birth time, by the way, is a double A. So she's Sun Scorpio, Moon Aries, and Ascendant Sagittarius. And she's one of the first things that comes up about her in the categories is traits, personality, loved by all. Now, interestingly, she has that Saggy ascendant, which is nice and light and fun, which is kind of, it differs from that very late degrees Scorpio sun that can be quite extreme and can provoke extreme kind of reactions and feelings in other people. However, she's got a lovely Grand Trine. She's got Mercury and Saturn rising in Sagittarius. Saturn rising in Sagittarius could be somebody who kind of carries the weight of the world on their shoulders, and Mercury being there as well gives a sense of I don't know. You kind of speaking with authority, a kind of knowledgeability about this person, especially rising in Sagittarius. There's something kind of scholarly about that. But what is nice is that her moon in Aries, which is quite close to the IC in her chart, is trine her Mercury-Saturn conjunction, which is rising. And also she has in Leo Uranus, which is also at the point of that trine as well. So she's got Mercury, Saturn, Uranus, and the Moon, and they're all in a really nice relationship with each other. And what else is nice is when you've got something rising. So when you've got something rising that's also in a Grand Trine. Now, depending on the house system you use, I'm going to go for equal because I was raised on equal. When you have a Grand Trine in your chart, which you have to think about the distance from the ascendant. So the first house and the fifth house and the ninth house are all the trine houses because they are kind of 120 degrees apart. So this is if you're using equal house. So with Jami Lee Curtis, her Mercury and Saturn are just slightly in the 12th, which means that her moon, it connects her trine from the 12th to the 4th to the 8th. So not quite the trine houses, though it is a nice Grand Trine. However, the relationship between the trine houses, the 1st, the 5th and the 9th, are that, the first is about identity and about who we are, how we see the world, our point of view, our perspective, our appearance, the way that we kind of, our outlook really, and how we kind of engage with our surroundings. And then the 5th house is all about developing our own sense of individuality and developing our own special gifts and understanding what makes us unique and what makes us special, and identifying with that aspect of ourselves where we learn to play, where we learn to flirt, where we enjoy developing our sexuality. And then you've got the 9th house, which is about going out and experiencing the world and connecting with the world in a bigger way, developing our philosophies, developing our ideas about life, developing our kind of our cultural palette and understanding what makes the world so interesting and so different in each corner of the globe. And higher education as well, it's like you've gone to school, you've studied, you're specifying in a subject. It might not be that you go to university, it might be like me, you go to London School of Astrology and you develop your unique and specialist subjects, really, something that really speaks to you and really develops your own, your personal development intellectually, and not just intellectual development, but also could be spiritual development or religious development. And then there's the overseas travel aspect of the 9th house. But these houses are connected by trine because they're all usually the same element. And that's kind of how I see the Grand Trine working, is that it has that kind of harmonious working together relationship which connects the self with the unique and special qualities about the individual, and also through their philosophies and the way of seeing the world. Now, obviously, it would be much more prominent if these were developed through a sense of, if they actually happen to fall in, for Jami Lee Curtis's chart, for example, falling in the 1st, the 5th and the 9th, which they don't, but that's fine. It just takes on that kind of feel for me, and hopefully you understand what I mean. However, she's got hers, like I said, her Mercury and Saturn conjunction, which falls on the ascendant. Usually quite heavy. If you met an individual with Saturn rising, they'd probably seem like they were quite stressed and, down in the dumps, pessimistic usually. But in a sign like Sagittarius, this is much more practical. I wouldn't say pessimistic, maybe I would say realistic, not necessarily as negative as being a total pessimist. And that Mercury is very playful and youthful and young and exuberant, as is a moon in Aries as well. It's quite playful and youthful, she's actually quite good. She's quite dynamic, isn't she, Jami Lee Curtis? She's been very in a lot of different films. The one that really always springs out to me is Trading Places. I think she's very versatile as an actress. I think she can play a lot of different roles. But yeah, to be well liked as well. I mean, she's got 2 Mars-ruled planets in her big 3, which is the Moon and Sun. The Sun being traditionally ruled by Mars, which is, it's in Scorpio, her Sun, by the way, so traditionally ruled by Mars, and then her Moon, which is Mars ruled, and her Mars placement is in Taurus, and it's retrograde as well. Oh gosh, she's got one of the rarest aspects going in astrology. It's not quite. I was going to say the Sun Mars opposition is very, very, very rare. It will have been, I don't know how far into Mars retrograde she's born, but her Sun's at 29 and her Mars is at 21. So it is kind of in opposition. It's quite wide, but it is in opposition. That is a very rare aspect to have. But yeah, she's got a Mars Jupiter opposition as well. So actually, she's got a chart that speaks of, is quite martial. There's a lot of Mars energy about it, which is very attractive, but it's not particularly, it's not the same kind of attractive as Venus. But she does have Sun-Venus conjunction, so that softens it all. That must be the likability. But yeah, so, this this Grand Trine can deliver good fortune, just being in the right place at the right time, that kind of, that synchronicity that just puts us where we need to be when we need to be there, gives us offers when we need a job offer. Maybe the money comes at the right time. Maybe it's not the money, maybe it's the opportunity of meeting somebody who can, hook us up, somebody in our network. But like I said, these Jupiterian qualities, they can be really nice, but they can also lead to being a bit lazy at times, because if you don't have to work hard for something, why push yourself? It's considered actually quite an unproductive. It's unproductive in the sense, a Grand Trine is unproductive in the sense that it's practically it's not as noticeable. You don't always spot these things because they're so subconscious. But also with the Grand Trine, it just, because there is no tension, there is no need to push yourself. So you kind of stagnate almost. But like I said, you can have grand earth, air, water or fire trines. So they'll be related by their element or their triplicity, but they will have one of each of the modes as well. So there will be a cardinal, a mutable and a fixed mode as well. So if we have a look, she's got, for example, Jami Lee Curtis has got mutable fire rising, and she's got her Mercury and her Saturn in mutable fire. She's got the moon in cardinal fire, and she's got Uranus in fixed fire. So she's definitely a nice one to look at. But I know lots of people, like I said, there's one friend of mine who is an astrologer. I don't know which planet she has in her Grand Trine, but she is really into fashion. She loves fashion, and she ended up getting a job, a bit like Rachel from Friends, as a personal shopper at Selfridges in London, in Oxford Street. She's literally living the dream. She's living her dream, and I think she's got Jupiter in her Grand Trine as well. And another friend of mine, another astrologer, she's got practical planets involved in her Grand Trine. She's got quite a wishy-washy woo-woo kind of chart that's could be very away with the fairies, but she's got a Grand Trine that incorporates Saturn, and it grounds her and it gives her practical application gifts. And she's very, very talented musician and astrologer, and an absolutely beautiful soul as well. So these Grand Trines can be really, really, really productive depending on the planets that are involved, and depending on whether or not you're actually consciously working with them or not. So yeah, I don't know if I've got any listener charts. Oh, hang on a sec. Let's have a quick look. I don't tend. You can, but I don't tend to include like the nodes. Like I said before, the nodes don't tend to get included when it comes to this. I don't look at Lilith as a point either, because Lilith is calculated, and you've got true and you've got mean Lilith. So actually, it's not really a fixed point in the chart. So I don't look at Lilith as a point that I would consider to be connected to an aspect pattern, unless it was with something else and it was like quite prominent. Just having a look to see. I've got my listener charts printed out in front of me. I think I would have had a look and I didn't see something for anybody here. Oh, here's one. Who's this? Jeff H. He's got Mars in Aries. Is this right? Am I doing this right? I don't know if that is actually. No, that can't be. No, not you, Jeff. I'm sorry. You will be discussed, I promise. No, I can't see a Grand Trine in the listener charts that I've got in front of me. One person that came close to a Grand Trine who isn't quite was Ava. She's got Jupiter and Saturn trine Neptune, and both of them are trine her ascendant, but like I said, it doesn't really work like that. It's nice that feeds into her ascendant, but it's not necessarily, the ascendant can't necessarily be included as part of a Grand Trine. Here's one. I've got one. Angelique, I've spoken about in a lot of the earlier episodes. She has got Pluto trine the moon. So Pluto in Sagittarius trine the moon in Leo, and that's both of them at 10 degrees. And then she's got Venus at 7 degrees of Aries as well. So that's a very feminine, a very female archetype driven, fiery Grand Trine. That's in the 2nd house, the 10th house, and the 6th house. So this might be like really good fortune when it comes to work opportunities and building a public reputation. And that Pluto in the 2nd could describe, having a lot of money and being quite powerful as well. A Pluto Venus trine is always quite a nice contact to have, and then to feed it into the moon as well, up there very close to the MC and in the 10th house. It's definitely a very strong, powerful. She's a strong, powerful woman who don't need no man. But yeah, that's an interesting one. You don't really need a release aspect with a trine either, because it's not something that it doesn't need releasing. If anything, it needs waking up. So but that's what we'll get onto on our next show, waking up the Grand Trine. Hope you found this episode useful, and I will add all of the charts mentioned to the blog post when it goes up. I'm always a little bit late putting these blog posts up, but it will get there, I promise. And I hope you guys are good. I am still accepting people submissions for if you want to be featured. It just is taking me a while to get round to all the different charts that I've been sent, but I promise I will. I promise. Anyway, thanks a lot for tuning in this time, and next time we're going to be talking about another aspect pattern called the kite. Take care, guys. Bye.